Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we have a lot to get into this week. But on tonight's episode, we're going to take a look at how the top 5 prospects in our preseason top 50 prospects list are doing right now, as we're almost a month into the major league season and a few weeks into the minor league season. We will get to that in just a moment. But first, a reminder that we are doing a live show on Saturday, May 11th at Checker Spot Brewing in Baltimore. The show will begin at 2 p.m., which is perfect for anyone who has tickets to that afternoon's Orioles game against the Diamondbacks. You can stop at Checker Spot ahead of time, go the short distance to Camden Yards afterwards, and catch the game. If you don't have tickets, the good news for you is that Checker Spot will have the game on after our show, and we are going to be doing a little bit of a viewing party. So certainly looking forward to that. We will have more details as the show approaches on guests, as well as any programming we plan to do during that episode. But certainly looking forward to it. Checker Spot Brewing is located at 1421 Ridgely Street in Baltimore. Now, on tonight's episode, we're going to discuss how the top 5 prospects in our preseason top 50 countdown are performing so far. And as a reminder, those players in order are Jackson Holliday, Kobe Mayo, Samuel Basayo, Colton Cowser, and Heston Kjerstad. Connor Norby ranked 6th on our list, and we are going to discuss him a little bit tonight, but we'll start off with Jackson Holliday, who entering Monday's action had 32 plate appearances in the major leagues, 1 hit, has struck out 50% of the time. This comes after Holliday was somewhat surprisingly sent down to AAA out of spring training, got off to a strong start there, and then was promoted after about 2 weeks or so to join the major league team. I know we talked about this last week, but it's worth rehashing it while we're on the subject. And Nick, I'll start with you. Should we be worried about Holliday right now?
Do we have to have this conversation right now? The Holliday discourse makes me want to delete Twitter finally. I don't know, be happy again. In the long run, no. I mean, right now it's not ideal, obviously. I think like you can there's a smart take. There's a logical conversation to be had about like saying he should go back to AAA, maybe for a reset. And I think that's fine if you have that take or have that opinion. I don't necessarily agree right now. I'm just not yet at that point of thinking that he should go back down yet. Because the team is winning. So which I feel like there are a number of people online who think we're in last place. It's this whole same conversation as last year. Like, we're one of the better teams in all of baseball right now. This team is winning. The lineup is producing. So they are 5th in runs scored, tops in home runs, 4th in batting average, tied with Atlanta in for a WRC plus lead, 3rd in weighted on base average. Like, that's a pretty good lineup. The lineup's not suffering. He's also playing very good defense, 96th percentile in outs above average. Only 1 second baseman in all of baseball, Marcus Semien, has more outs above average than Jackson Holliday at second base right now. So for those reasons, I'm going to give him another 2-3 weeks in the big leagues. And we don't know his mental state. No one does. This organization knows where he's at mentally better than anyone else. If they think a reset in Norfolk will do the trick, then so be it. And they'll make that move. But there's definitely no sugarcoating that it's been a terrible offensive start. But I think it was that at bat on Sunday against Kansas City, the staring at strike 3 right down the pipe with bases loaded, that one was rough. That was the first time I was like, oof, swing and miss and be late on the pitch, attack it, and that's fine. Guess wrong, that's one thing, but to just sit and stare middle was kind of rough. But the defense has been solid. The team is winning. He's a top prospect in the game for a laundry list of reasons. I think he gets a few more weeks to figure it out.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, not only does he have 96th percentile in OAA, outs above average, he's got a 2.5 positive defensive WAR according to Fangraphs. So clearly he's playing a good second base. The team is winning. He's batting 9th. He's not really hurting the team necessarily. And especially since he got his first hit, I do think his at-bats have been better. Obviously, still hasn't had another hit since his first one, but he's making more contact. seems to be getting into better counts. He did hit into a little bit of bad luck over the weekend, but kind of like, I don't know. It does seem like he's pressing. It does seem like he is the timing just seems a little bit off. And I think once he gets the timing, things will get better. But if it's still happening in 2-3 weeks, like it's still as dreadful as it has been, then maybe, yeah, like Colton Cowser, you send him down and you just let him get comfortable again, and then you try again at a certain point. But who's really going to be there to play second base if he's not? Is Ramon Urias really the answer? Maybe if Kobe Mayo keeps crushing AAA and Jackson keeps struggling, you make the switch where you're like, all right, let's put Kobe at third, move Westberg over to second base, and then you kind of still have a rookie prospect trying to get a feel for the majors while you are hopefully still being productive and winning games. I don't know, but I would give him more time. I think I saw today that Aaron Judge is one for his last 23 with 13 strikeouts, and Jackson Holliday's one for his last 23 with 12 strikeouts. So he's doing even better than Aaron Judge. You can't argue with that. Not worried at all in the long run. In the short term, I'd love to just see him get like a swinging bunt single and then a little pop up that finds its way into the outfield where he gets credited for a hit, and then it's like just get some positive momentum going for him and then take a little bit of that pressure off.
Yeah, he needs some positive momentum right now. I think one of the challenges has been that above the strikeouts, which have been an issue, when he's making contact, he's really not hitting the ball hard. Ground ball rate going into Monday's game is at 57.1%. You look at his baseball savant page and you look at pretty much any metric there is for batted ball data, and it's all in the blue. It's all in a low percentile. So he's struggling right now, but I agree with you guys that you give him at least another 2 to 3 weeks. Plus, there really is not an easy answer in my mind, and we can get into this a little bit more as we talk about some of the other players, to how you would replace Holiday, because the logical move in my mind, if you picture it being a short-term thing, would be to bring Nick Maton up to be the left-handed hitting second baseman, but he is on the IL right now. So that's not an option. So there's a lot of complications that you have to sort through there.
What's Tony Kemp up to? How about Colton Wong? Yeah, exactly. Unless you get creative, like I'm saying, like swing Westberg over and then start Urias at third, or bring up Mayo, or if you want to give Connor Norby a shot, but he hasn't even been playing much second base in the minors. So yeah, it's interesting. It's tough. I think they're going to stick with it for now. Just like you didn't see them hurry up and change their mind super quickly when they didn't start him on the majors. I don't think they decided to bring him up and let him get his feet wet. They're going to see it play out to its fullest.
Yeah, well, and speaking of, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to reiterate the fact that like he just turned 20 back in December, like, and for that reason that's a big reason why I just feel like this organization would not have called him up if they didn't feel like he was ready. And Major League Baseball, as we're finding out, is extremely difficult for these young kids. Like, we've seen this plenty of times, and I think Holiday he's the type of prospect that I think you give him a few more weeks. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If this team was losing, they need a jolt of offense, sure, I'd say make the switch, but they're not. They're cruising right now, and things are fairly good. So yeah, if we'll come back together in a week or two, and if he's 1 for 50, like, that's a whole different conversation. But let's see what he does here this week out in California. Maybe the little California air, sunshine, good weather, maybe that will help boost the morale a little bit. But I don't know. We'll see. Not worried yet, though.
Yeah, certainly hope so. And since we were just touching on him as possibly a guy you could bring up, we'll turn our attention now to Kobe Mayo, who ranked second on our preseason list. And as Kobe Mayo does, Kobe Mayo is crushing the baseball. He had 3 hits on Sunday. All of them were over 100 miles per hour off the bat. The power is showing up in a big way for him right now. You look at the batted ball data, it has been very good to this point. He's already hit 7 home runs in 21 games, a 160 WRC plus. He's not walking much at all. But other than that, you really can't find a blemish in his stat line. So, Bob, I'll start with you here. What do you think he has left to do to get to the major leagues?
Um, he needs an injury by a guy that's ahead of him on the major league team. I mean, he's there, he's ready. Here, I'm going to pull this from Baseball America. JJ Cooper wrote this morning, writing about Kobe Mayo. I resisted writing about Mayo last week as he just continues to impress week after week. And how many times can I write that he hits the ball really hard, hits it in the air, doesn't swing and miss very much, and is very young? So instead, I'll just hope that he'll be up in the majors soon so I don't have to find new ways to express just how elite of a prospect he is. Jordan Westburg's emergence has perhaps clouded the immediate future for Mayo, but there's no question he's shown everything he needs to, checks every analytical box, and hopefully the Orioles find a way to squeeze him onto the major league roster soon. Yeah, I mean, he's striking out a little bit more, walking a little bit less, but I think that's just because he's crushing the ball. And when you're feeling yourself and you're crushing the ball like that, you're going to be swinging more often because you're doing damage. So no problem at all with that. And again, it's only been less than 100 plate appearances as well. 160 WRC plus in AAA at 21 years old. Or 22 years old, excuse me. He's old man now. I think they're going to have to make room for him sometime soon, whether it's start getting him some time in the outfield, a little more time at first base just to get him more comfortable. A right-handed bat, the lineup actually could use a thumper from the right-hand side. I think he's not too far away, and he's doing everything that he should be. He's made some impressive plays defensively at third base too, made some errors as well, but I think he can be league average third baseman and not hurt you at all. Easily make up for it with the bat.
Yeah, the numbers you guys rattled off, he's doing this, putting up that kind of production, and he's like what, 4 years younger than his peers at AAA. Like, he's extremely young for the level, and that's the key thing here with Mayo, and why I think that bat. I don't care about the defense right now. I don't want to have the conversation about the defense. I don't want to have the conversation about where he fits defensively right now. That's not for us to decide. That's an issue for this front office, the job that I don't envy, putting all these pieces together, which, by the way, it's a lot more fun. It is frustrating, but also a lot more fun to be talking about Kobe Mayo, who, in how many other organizations would Kobe Mayo be like, this is the guy we're waiting for to build our major league roster around? Or like, we've got one good piece in the major leagues. We've got the pitching. Kobe Mayo is going to kickstart our hitting, like, in this organization. And with Kobe Mayo, it's just like, if he doesn't come up till the end of the year, like, we might be all right. I think we'll be good. He's just a guy.
He's just going to join Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Colton Cowser, Jordan Westburg, Jackson Holliday.
Exactly. And it's like, it's mind blowing. But the fact that he's putting up those numbers you guys ran off, though, 160 WRC plus, so he's 60% above league average in a league where he is 3-4 years younger than his peers. The 7 home runs, he's going to smash he hit 12 last year in 270 at bats in AAA. He's going to smash that. The strikeout rate is high, but it's coming back down. I don't know what it was a week ago when I was looking at this, but it's coming down. You guys mentioned the walks. That's the one blemish on his stat line is the walks. He was like 15-16% last year between AA and AAA. You don't love to see him at 5% right now, but he's doing everything else right and better. He's even hitting the ball harder. I didn't know if that was possible, but he is. If I search the Savant minor league leaderboards, I haven't played around with these too much. But if I did this right, then right now at AAA, only James Wood and Adrian Del Castillo, catching prospect for the Diamondbacks, who's actually having a phenomenal year. Those are the only 2 guys in AAA hitting the ball harder than Kobe Mayo on average. Mayo's averaging 92.7 miles per hour exit velocity. That's up a whole mile per hour from last year in AAA. The hard hit percentage is basically on par from last year. It's above 50%. His barrel rate is among the best in AAA. This defense aside, like, that bat is forcing the issue fairly soon, I think.
Yeah, I have a theory I'd love to run by you guys. And really, Jordan Westburg's the one that kind of made me have this theory. It's that players walk less when they're hitting the ball better. And when they're struggling a little bit to see the ball, the walk rate goes up. You saw it with Gunnar at the beginning of last year. he starts hitting the ball with authority, the walks go back down. I don't know. So I feel like it just means, if my theory is correct, that Mayo's seeing the ball really well and he doesn't want to walk. He wants to do damage. But
Yeah, I think that seems fair. He definitely is seeing the ball right now, and when he squares up on it, he's hitting it a long way. The defensive question, I agree with Nick. I think it's kind of gotten overblown to this point, but I do wonder if he gets some reps in the outfield, possibly here in the next few weeks, just because you're going to want as many options to get his bat in the lineup as you can when he gets to the major leagues. And in a scenario where you have Ryan O'Hearn, Ryan Mountcastle, Kobe Mayo, Jordan Westberg, and Jackson Holiday all on the roster at the same time, you're going to have to figure out where Mayo fits in. And in some nights, that might be in right field. We'll see, though. But I'll move on down to Samuel Basallo, who had a decent week last week when the Bay Sox faced Altoona. Now, mind you, the Bay Sox were only 14 games into their season. So we're still looking at a small sample size. But when I look at Basallo's numbers, so far 237 average, 555 OPS, a home run. I don't really care about that a whole lot. That's just a kind of slow 2 weeks. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this. Last year, his walk to strikeout numbers were pretty good all season across 3 levels in the minors. So far, he has struck out 16 times and has yet to draw a walk. So, Nick, with that in mind, what have your thoughts been on Basallo to this point?
Put him in the Jackson Holiday bus category. What a waste that the Yankees should have left him to the Yankees to worry about. Same. I'm not worried at all. I don't care either. I don't think we're going to see him take the title as top prospect. I think that was a long shot anyway, and I think he probably needed a hot start in Double-A this year, and which has not been there. But I don't care about the top 100 prospect rankings or who the top prospect is. It was fun to get the 3. It'd be amazing to have the 4, but I really don't care. I'm just more concerned about Basallo's development. And right now, he's 19 years old. That's what's most important. He's a 19-year-old kid, 5 years younger than the average Double-A player. He also had that stress. It's a stress fracture, right? I think in arm, shoulder. I don't remember exactly where, but the stress fracture, elbow. Thank you, elbow. Too many body parts. So that happened in spring or before spring. Either way, it disrupted his routine coming into spring training. Yes, he was hitting and DHing, but I do wonder like how much of his spring was impacted and his ramp up to spring was impacted by that injury. And right now we're just watching extended spring training for Samuel Basallo. I still think he's put together some good at bats. That opposite field power, he's showing that. The strikeout rate and walk rate numbers, I think it's whatever. It's 14 games. I think those are going to stabilize as he starts to settle in. He's incredibly young. He's coming off an injury, probably the first big injury of his career up to this point, that I know of at least. So not major in like the grand scheme of things as far as the injury is concerned, but one that definitely had caused a hiccup, I think, this year, coming into this year. So teenager, he's got all the hype coming into the season. He had the massive year last year in high A, finished it in Double-A. So I imagine the injury is probably mentally frustrating, and now he's playing catch up. The thread of photos that I'm collecting of Basallo's facial expressions after at bats and mannerisms. I love this kid even more. That he is not only at Double-A at 19 years old as a catching prospect, but he is showing off the personality as well. And maybe it's not so fun for the umpires who he's showing up a little bit, but it's fun as a fan to watch this guy at bat. Even when he strikes out, it's fun to watch Samuel Basallo.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, thanks, Zach, for ruining my theory immediately, because Basallo has yet to walk, clearly not seeing the ball all that well, but it's all right. Yeah, if you take away those 2 strikeouts where he flipped out or, had those gifable moments, strikeout rate is only like 23%. So he'll walk a little more. Like you said, this is kind of like his ramp up to spring training. He's still not catching yet, right? He just started playing first base, so he's got to get comfortable. Yeah, I mean, he got 16 plate appearances in Double-A last year, but at the end of a season where he's just lighting the world on fire, it doesn't mean that much. He's still a 19-year-old in AA, and he'll be fine. It's not like the Jackson Holiday situation where he's striking out 50% of the time, batting under 100. So, yeah, no worries. I think it's just, some people slump in the beginning of the season. Some people have slumps in the middle of the season. This is a slump, and he'll be fine.
Colton Cowser was fourth on our list coming into this year. And so far, he looks like one of the top, if not the top candidate for Rookie of the Year in the American League. Still an early season, but right now he's second on the team in F4. He's got a WRC plus of 240. He hit his fifth home run of the season on Sunday. And strikeout rate is a little high at 30%, but walking 7% of the time, which for a guy in his rookie season, I will take that gladly. The defense has looked good. Bob, what else is there left to say about Colton Cowser? I know it's a small sample size, and his week this past week was colder than when he won Player of the Week, but it still ended pretty well for him.
Yeah, I mean, what is there to say? He throws the ball into the fountain in Kansas City, Craig Kimbrell's save ball, and then just hits one into the fountain the next day. He's just having like a storybook season so far. And Bobby Jones, a patron in our Discord, made a great point that I was thinking about as well. We even saw it in spring training. We thought we'd see a little more walking, a little more plate discipline from Cowser. He's only got a 7% walk rate when he's typically around 16%. I think that's just because we talked about during spring training how it looked like he's more aggressive when balls are in the strike zone, which is a good thing. That's why he's probably making more impact contact. And I was saying maybe he's just got to, he's feeling that. He's getting used to that. So once he settles in and can combine that with his elite plate discipline, then we'll see the walk rate come up. And hopefully the strikeout rate come down a little bit. But he's probably going to be a guy that strikes out close to 30% of the time. And it's fine. Clearly, look, he's putting up great numbers despite that. So very happy with what he's done. He just looks more and more comfortable defensively as well in the outfield. So, yeah, I think he's probably maybe the favorite for Rookie of the Year at this point. And glad I got a bet on him at plus 5,000 in November. So,
yeah, I would love if Cowser. We talked last week about Cowser, and I think just specifically Cowser, but we were talking about like what in his profile, what that he's shown us those first couple weeks of the year was sustainable or not. It's been a whole nother week, and like the baseball savant page is still bright red. And I would love it if this guy could continue to mash and play the way he has. He's going to come down to earth a little bit, obviously, but if he could stay like Rookie of the Year caliber play and still be holding that strikeout rate of like 28 to 30%, that I think that would be huge and put it into perspective a lot better for some people, like when you're looking at some of these other guys coming up through the system. But the two things that stand out to me the most with Cowser are the power in the defense. He's got a hard hit rate over 51%. His max EV is top 5% in the league. His average EV is up 4 miles per hour from his stint in the majors last year, which is now 3 miles per hour above league average. We heard multiple times that the Orioles thought that power was in that bat, and he's showing it now in the majors, which is awesome. And I know this just like rips the hearts out of most of the beat staff, but the torch has been passed from Austin Hayes to Colton Cowser. Like left field is Cowser's job. Hayes can have some starts against lefties when he's back. He's on the IL earlier, like an hour or two before
he hurt his calf trying to catch up with Colton Cowser, keep pace with him.
Exactly. Here we go again. Hayes can have some starts against lefties. That's fine. But an opposing lefty should not mean an automatic sit for Cowser at this point. I spent last year ready to go to war for Cowser. I've got the screenshots. I've got the receipts. I've got them all. I was ready to unleash them. But he's exceeding even what I thought we would see out of him this year, and which I was fairly high on the guy. And so, yeah, I love seeing it. And best of all, same thing as Basayo. Like, find me a player in the majors who's more fun than Colton Cowser right now. Like this team has future MVPs, maybe hopefully a future Cy Young winner on it or two right now. But Cowser, I think, is quickly becoming a fan favorite, and I love this for him because he has earned every bit of this, and I hope this torrid stretch that he's on continues.
Moo indeed.
We're recording this on Monday night, and we did get a little bit of breaking news about the next player we're going to talk about, Heston Kjerstad. Jacob Calvin Meyer at the Baltimore Sun reported that a source with direct knowledge had told the Sun that the Orioles will recall Kjerstad from Norfolk on Tuesday. Kjerstad has been off to a torrid start with the Tides this season. Through 102 plate appearances, he's hitting .349 with a 189 WRC plus, 10 home runs. And we've been talking a lot tonight about hitters not walking. Kjerstad's the outlier in that conversation. He's walked 11.8% of the time while striking out 21.6% of the time. Now, to put that in perspective, his strikeout rate is only a percentage higher than it was at AAA last year in 76 games, but his walk rate has climbed by almost a full 4%. He clearly deserves a shot at the major leagues. I think had it not been for Cowser's strong spring training, he may have made the opening day roster. But Kjerstad was a little bit slower to get going. Cowser has a big spring. He ends up making the roster ahead of him. And Nick, just with this thought in mind, is this Kjerstad's chance to stick for good, you think?
I hope so. I was thinking about it earlier. I had a point I was going to make about Kjerstad, but that point, there's no point in making that point now that he's on the major league roster. But I'm not even going to go there. I say yes. Like, this is your opportunity. He was up last year. He's on the playoff roster. Clearly, this organization believes in him. I'm going to say it again. I think the idea that he is a defensive liability in the outfield is overblown. It's the same conversation, the same thought process as like Santander out there in right field. He's not going to play center field. Maybe the Orioles don't love him in left field at home, but I think he's better defensively than a lot of people give him credit for. I don't ever see him winning a Gold Glove, but still better. I think this is the point where it's only 10 games, and I know the organization loves Austin Hayes, and I know everyone is saying he's going to turn it around. And I was going to make another point about Hayes, in that if you really do think he can turn it around, if you are that high on him, if you do think that illness and losing 10 pounds, it's like, what kind of illness did you have, man? Lose 10 pounds, and you weren't sick for like weeks at a time there. But if all that is true, then I'm fine with it. But like I said, Cowser is the everyday left fielder. Hayes is a small side platoon here. At this point, though, like Kjerstad, this is your chance to have that Colton Cowser type run and take the job. Cowser got that opportunity in spring training. They both did in spring training. Unfortunately, Cowser was the one that took advantage of it instead of Kjerstad. Well, unfortunately for Kjerstad, not the organization, obviously. But Cowser took advantage of it. Now Kjerstad, he didn't have the greatest spring training. He goes back to the AAA. He's raking. You ran off the numbers there. This is your chance. And when Austin Hayes comes back healthy in a week or whatever, however long he's on the IL, like, he's got to fight. He's going to have to fight for that playing time, because now Kjerstad's here. And if he's hot this week out in California against the Angels, you can't send this guy back down, I think, at this point. I don't think you can, at least.
And if he's going to be as comfortable at the plate in the majors, once he comes up, as he has been all year in AAA with Norfolk, I think we're going to see in about 2 weeks our notification. Austin Hayes has been activated from the injured list and optioned to AAA Norfolk to try and get healthy and get right. Yeah, I think he's been phenomenal. The Barrel King is right back at it, just hitting them, spraying the ball all over the field with power. Gets the perfect launch angle. He doesn't hit the ball as hard as Kobe Mayo and Colton Cowser. Surprisingly, Cowser hits the ball harder, I think, than Kjerstad with regularity. But Kjerstad just knows how to hit the sweet spot of the bat, get the right launch angles. Still hits it hard, but and he just looks so comfortable up there. That's why I'm not surprised that his walk rate is almost 12%. It just seems like the ball looks like a volleyball to him as it's coming in right now, and he deserves it. He got a taste in the majors last year and performed pretty admirably. Had a 104 WRC plus in his 33 plate appearances with the Orioles last year, and hopefully he can build off that And yeah, just add another stud young player to this lineup. Colton Cowser was AL Player of the Week 2 weeks ago. Jordan Westberg was the Player of the Week this past week. Maybe Heston Kjerstad can throw his name into the ring.
Are you guys though? What if Kjerstad does come up and play well and says, "You're not sending me back down to AAA. I'm not going back to Norfolk. Like I grew up right outside of Norfolk. I understand why you wouldn't want to go back to Norfolk, but like, would it be too many left? Are we talking about too many lefties on this roster? Like, let's say that case, like Bob laid out, is true. And what if Kjerstad does play so well, and Hayes, he has the option, he goes back down to AAA, or a move is made or something? Like, are there too many lefties on this major league roster? Just
I would be a little concerned about it. Yeah, it just feels like, I'll look at it from this perspective. If Kjerstad performs really well in the next week and deserves a roster spot over Austin Hayes, that's fine by me and good for him. But I just wonder where are you going to have that right-handed bat? Are you going to hope that when they're turned to the right side, Rutzman and Santander give you some power? Do you hope that Mountcastle can have a good season? Does Urias pick up the pace at some point? I don't see it happening, but you never know. So I don't know. It is a good question. I don't think that it would hurt this team, but I also think that it would be something you would want to address somehow, whether that's eventually bringing Kobe Mayo into the fold and giving him regular playing time, or it's going out and trying to find a veteran who could supplement or complement one of your lefties in a platoon situation.
I also think it's just a little bit overblown as far as the splits go. The Orioles go to such an extreme with it. And Kjerstad, he throughout his career, at least, he's handled lefties just as well as he's handled righties. I don't know if he's a guy that's really going to be hurt by a left-handed pitcher. And Austin Hayes, it's not like he hits lefties that much better than righties either. So
that's true. Yeah.
I think it's a little bit overblown, but I get it to an extent. You don't want that. And eventually, if and when Mayo and maybe Norby come up at some point, I don't know where you have room for all these guys, but those are some righties, and there's some more righties on the way. But like Basayo, he's lefty. Maybe it becomes an issue at some point. I don't think it's that big of a deal right now.
Speaking of Connor Norby, let's wrap up there. He did finish outside of our top 5 on our list. He came in 6, but this is where we should plug Patreon, because if you're a member of our Patreon community, you're going to get an updated top 50 sometime in the beginning of May. We update our list monthly on Patreon on the main feed. We do it twice a year. Once preseason, usually around the time pitchers and catchers report, and then again in late July, early August to add players who were included in the draft and make any other changes. But if you're a Patreon member, you get an update every month. And our May update is coming soon. I have a feeling Connor Norby's probably going to be in the top 5. We haven't finished our list yet, but I have a pretty good feeling he's going to be there because he's hitting the ball really well at Norfolk right now. 132 WRC plus with 5 homers through his first 101 plate appearances. Walked just under 10% of the time while striking out a 23.8% clip. He is hitting 303 to go with that. We've talked about Norby a lot, and the angle always is that there is nothing left for him to prove at AAA. He's blocked. Is he going to get traded? On and on. Let's toss out the trade part of the discussion for tonight, and just as we quickly wrap up here with him. I'll just throw this out there. What scenario do you think it would take for Norby to get to Baltimore this year and have at least, partial playing time? And I'll start with Bob on that one.
I don't know. I was kind of, before I heard about the Kjerstad news, I was kind of wondering if Norby could be the Hayes replacement, because he's been playing a lot of corner outfield. He's a right-handed hitter that can play left and right field for you. And I don't think he would require everyday at bats the way a stud, not that he's not a stud prospect, but like one of these top elite prospects would. So I think, I actually think he's gonna find a way to make his major league debut with the Orioles, and then eventually be traded as part of a big deal, whether it's this trade deadline or in the offseason. But I think maybe Arias gets hurt. And again, they don't want to bring Mayo up to replace Arias because you don't want Mayo to sit on the bench. Maybe Norby could be that guy to be more of a role player his first time up. But he's just such a, as Ben Badler says on the Baseball America I forget their podcast that he does with Ben, a lot. What, Nick, you know what I'm talking about.
Future projection?
Future projection.
That one?
Carlos Collazo and Ben Badler.
Yeah.
He's hitterish, super hitterish, and he knows how to find the bat, put it on the ball, get the base hits. And I feel like he's hitting the ball harder this year than he did last year. I know there was talk of a more vertical bat path with the swing. I don't know. I don't get into the technical stuff like that so much, but it does seem like the exit velocities are increased so far this year. So he's continuing to get better. He's playing with the chip on his shoulder, and I hope that it happens for him.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what has to happen for him to crack the majors either, but I did look the other week where he is hitting the ball a lot harder, and I don't know if that's sustained or not. It's been like the 2 weeks since we talked about that, but I mean, right now he's on pace he had 21 home runs last year in AAA. He had 17 the year before that in AA. He's on pace right now to blow past 21 home runs on the year this year in AAA if he were to stay down there for the full season. Everything else is remaining consistent as far as his numbers go, like ground ball, fly ball, all of it's pretty much in line from his last year. His last year's numbers in AAA, except he's hitting for even more power so far in this young season. So I don't know. I think he's out to prove a point. I don't know anyone in baseball who has a bigger chip on their shoulder, at least in this organization. So if he does eventually get the call up to the big leagues, I'd be scared for the opposing pitcher because that man is going to be out to prove a point to everyone that he deserved to be up sooner. But like we mentioned, we talked about with Kobe and Mayo, it's from a fan perspective, it's kind of fun to sit here and be like, where the hell do we fit Connor Norby in? And he's a top 100 caliber prospect, and we're having trouble figuring out where he fits in. But he's clearly not phased because, like I said, the numbers, they all line up to last year, and he's a well above average statistical baseball player. So shout out to Connor Norby. Hopefully we do see in an Orioles uniform at some point, but yeah, I could not tell you when or how at this point.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I thought about this as we were, talking through this segment, and it dawned on me that Norby might be in the major leagues, coming to the major leagues tomorrow, rather than Kjerstad if Norby already had the 40-man roster spot. But he's not Rule 5 eligible until after this season. So my scenario that I was going to bring up, which is maybe a Joey Ortiz type of situation, where Ortiz got a couple of short stints in the majors last year because of injuries, doesn't apply because Ortiz was on the 40-man last year. Norby's not on the 40-man now and won't be until he's either called up or he's added this offseason to be protected from the Rule 5 draft. He's clearly earned it. I get the feeling that somehow it's going to work out for him. Whether that's in Baltimore or somewhere else, I don't know. But I think for this season, it's going to take the Orioles realizing and deciding, okay, Ramon Urias has been great for a few years. It's just not going to work this year. Let's try to bring in Norby, or you have a long-term injury and you figure you add Norby to the 40-man roster, then give him a shot to see what he can do. Well, that does it for this episode. In our next episode, we're going to talk about some stat lines in the minor leagues, specifically players off to good and bad starts, and whether or not we think that the players with hot starts are going to have sustained success, and whether the players who are off to bad starts are going to continue to slump, or if they're going to turn around soon. That's our next episode. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media platforms, including Facebook, Threads, Instagram, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. If you subscribe today, you will have access to an article that Nick just wrote detailing some of the interesting pitching trends unfolding in the Orioles minor leagues over the first couple of weeks. You don't want to miss that, and we'll have analysis on there throughout the year. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan. and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to take a dive into the starts of the season for a few Orioles players. Some of them good, some of them bad. And we're going to talk about whether or not they're sustainable. And just to give an example, we're going to go through some guys who are off to surprisingly hot starts at their minor league level and some guys who are off to cold starts and try to figure out what's going to happen from here. And I will just dive right in with my choice for this segment, which is Judd Fabian. Fabian is coming off a very good week at Bowie, and this continues a trend that we have seen so far this year. You may recall Fabian last year got off to a strong start at Aberdeen and then earned a promotion to Bowie. When he got to Bowie, some of the concerns about him being a 3 true outcomes hitter were on full display. He would typically hit a home run, strike out, or walk. He ultimately struck out in 37.5% of his 288 plate appearances with the Bay Sox last year, while belting 15 home runs and walking about 15% of the time. This year, through 12 games and 52 plate appearances, the strikeout rate has plummeted, still a little high at 26.9%, but nonetheless a big step forward from last year. And he's got a 172 WRC plus, 2 homers, and a walk rate of 13.5%. So, Judd Fabian, being a more complete hitter, is this sustainable? If it is, could it sustain itself within a promotion to AAA, or do you expect some of his bad tendencies to show up again? And with that, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, I do. I tend to think that it will probably show itself back up if and when he gets promoted to AAA until he can adjust to that level. But it's still a fantastic sign. Strikeout rate tends to stabilize around 60 plate appearances. He's got 52. So if he's striking out around 26, 27% of the time, that's amazing for Judd Fabian because he's got stupid power, great patience and eye at the plate, draws a ton of walks. If he can just, like we've said before, if he can hit 240, 250 with his other skills, then he's a major leaguer, no doubt about it. So, yeah, I'm very optimistic following his start to the season. And anytime you hit a walk-off grand slam, I mean, you can't do much better than that.
And we just talked about Colton Cowser and what he's doing with a 30% strikeout rate in the big leagues. Fabian is better defensively, plays a premium center field defense. So if he can do all of that while also showcasing that kind of power with a 30%, whatever strikeout rate in the big leagues down the road, I think that will play. I think Fabian taking this step forward, if this does remain consistent, which I hope it is, and I think it can be because he made a lot of big adjustments and improvements when he was in Aberdeen. And we just didn't see that when he got promoted to Bowie. So new level, he was adjusting. Now he's adjusted. He's better prepared. And he showcased those improvements. We're now seeing them play out at the AA level. And I think if he can do that and it's sustainable, then it is a pretty big deal, in my opinion, because I'm not saying he's going to be major league ready this year. He may not be pounding down the door to the majors until, mid to late 2025 if everything continues to go like this. But to have that guy who is a no doubt center fielder step up and emerge, I think is huge because it's not going to be Hudson Haskin. Dylan Beavers is a corner guy. Trying to think of cycle through the names here. It's not going to be Dante Williams. He's not going to hit. I know a lot of people want to say Enrique Bradfield Jr. He's there. He's that natural maybe successor to Cedric Mullins in a couple of years, but this is his first year in pro ball. He's in high A. There are a lot of questions about that bat still. So he can change the game defensively and on the base paths, but Fabian also plays elite defense, has good speed as well. It has insane power. Enrique Bradfield has virtually no power. So for Fabian to take that step forward this year, I think that would be pretty massive. And I tweeted this out yesterday. I really like this, and it's actually gone down a little bit more. With the 3 true outcome stuff, 52% of his at-bats last year in AA were either a home run or a strikeout. That's now down to 36%. So he is definitely a much more well-rounded hitter so far this year.
And hey, he's a right-handed bat. So in the last episode, we talked about, are we too lefty heavy? Not if Judd Fabian continues his development.
this is going to sustain itself at Double-A. I think that this is a new normal for him. As Nick said, he made adjustments at Aberdeen last year that allowed him to be successful. I think it's taken a little bit of time for him to catch up at Double-A, but this is closer to the type of player that Judd Fabian can be. Now, I will say this, which is that Fabian, given how aggressively the Orioles move some of their prospects leading up to AAA, and the fact that he came from Florida, college pick, he's 23, he'll be 24 in September. That kind of looks like a guy that you would want to move quickly if you can. But I wouldn't mind seeing the Orioles slow play this one a little bit. I don't like to use that term, but in this case, I wouldn't mind them maybe holding out until July, just to make sure that when Fabian gets to AAA, he can hit the ground running and do not have as much of a drop off as he had last year. I would expect a little bit of a downtick because adjusting to those breaking balls at a higher level is a challenge for any hitter. But I think that you can find a way, hopefully, where that drop off is not as stark as it was last year, and he's able to have something close to this kind of production throughout the season.
Yeah. It'd be interesting if they do hold him down, because it looks like Peyton Burdick getting DFA'd earlier. We'll see if he clears waivers, although he probably won't. Kerstad up in AAA, does he take, or Kerstad up in the pros now, does he take that job? It's like, if Fabian's going to hit this well, do they go ahead and move him up to AAA sooner rather than later? Because, I mean, someone is going to have to play AAA, play the outfield in AAA. But do they say they feel like, yeah, we do think this is sustainable as well, and they go ahead and make that move? Be interesting to see where Fabian's playing in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, Haskins should be back with Norfolk next week. I assume Billy Cook could easily go back up, but yeah, if you're reading and watching a lot, reading the box scores and watching a lot of Norfolk Tides like we are, outside of the top 5 when the season started, top 4 as of tonight, top 3 starting tomorrow, it's pretty ugly. So yeah, Norfolk could use him at some point pretty soon. I'm sure of that.
We're going to stick to this theme and go with Bob, because he's got a player at Aberdeen that's kind of performing in a similar trend right now.
Yeah, something about Creed Willems where he struggles mightily and he's just digesting it all season long. Off-season hits, boom. Oh, I mastered it. I figured it out. Last season, after hitting, all right, let's do this properly. After hitting 190 with a 65 WRC plus as a 19-year-old in low A with a 5.7% walk rate, 27.6% strikeout rate. He comes back last year and just crushes to a 192 WRC plus. Bats 302 with an OPS over 1,000. Walks 16.7%, so 11 percentage points higher. Strikes out 3% less. ISO spikes. And it's like, oh, all of a sudden Creed Willems is this legit prospect, and he still is. Gets promoted, 20 years old in high A, and he kind of stinks up the joint. Bats 192 with the 60 WRC plus. Again, OPS under 600 for the Ironbirds. Walk rate goes back down to 8.4. Strikeout rate goes back up to 27.7%. ISO dips again. Well, he's back in Aberdeen this year. He's still 20, will turn 21 in early June. And he's batting 326 with a 213 WRC plus, OPS over 1,100, striking out less than 20% of the time. Walk rate's only 6.5% right now, but it almost seems like an organizational philosophy at this point that the walk rates have dipped and impact has gone up. But yeah, he's just off to a fantastic start once again. Maybe this year he can, and it's when, not if, when he gets promoted to Double-A at some point middle of the season. Hopefully this time he can continue to perform when he gets promoted. But he's a legit prospect, still only 20 years old. The Orioles are loaded with catchers. It's kind of absurd. Creed Willems just adding his name to the list, trying to move up the prospect ranks.
He's going to get promoted to Bowie in a month and a half or so, and he's going to suck the rest of the year. He's not going to hit when he gets to Bowie because he's got to continue this trend. And if he does, it's going to be the most hilarious thing ever. I cannot wait for it, actually. Sorry, Creed. Like, you're going to learn, you're going to develop, but I hope the numbers aren't good when you get to Bowie. And then next year, 2025, he rakes again to start Bowie. And there will be many articles that I will enjoy reading about Creed Willems. I am becoming more of a believer. I will say that to perform like he has in high A. And one of the bigger things that sticks out to me is the strikeout rate, to be honest. Like he's always been, you rattled off the numbers there. He's always been a mid 20s to upper 20% strikeout rate guy. And now he's below 20% right now as we're recording this. So I like it. The home run power is there. He's hitting for average. He's not striking out nearly as much as he has been throughout his career. The 213 WRC plus is not sustainable, obviously, but he is the defense. What I was thinking about. There are other defensive catchers in this organization who I think I'm going to mention one later on, maybe in the mailbag episode, that could factor into the major league plans at some point for this team. But if Creed's bat is going to perform like this, his defense could even take a step back, I think. And this is like a first base DH type guy. I think he could survive in the major leagues if he's going to continue to trend like this. But still a long way to go there. But I think for right now, yeah, this shout out to Creed Willems for this start. And he's racking up the doubles. I think he has 4 in his last 2 games or something. He's on a tear, and I don't see him slowing down, at least right now when he's in Aberdeen.
His ISO right now is 442. That's higher than Mac Horvath's OPS.
Yeah, Willems
no, it's not.
Willems is off to a really good start. I do think he's gonna, ultimately put up really good numbers at Aberdeen, even if the WRC plus isn't sustainable, which it isn't. The thing I do find interesting is that his walk rate is down almost 2%, but his strikeout rate has dropped so much, as Bob said, that you kind of live with that. Here, I want to throw out this question, though, before we move on to Nick's selections. How do you actually fit Willems into Bowie? Because you have Silas Ardway there. Samuel Basayo has yet to catch, but we know that when he recovers from the elbow issue, that the Orioles are going to want to put him behind the plate. Then you have Connor Pavolony, who has not hit well in his career, but I think a lot of people in this organization like because of his defense and his ability to work with the pitching staff. And T.T. Bowen's a guy who I'm going to talk about in a little bit, hitting the ball pretty well for the Bay Sox right now at first base. So where would Willems actually fit in? I know that they will make room for him. I don't doubt that. But how do you do it? Because there's a lot of first base catcher types with the Bay Sox right now.
First, if you're going to be overloaded at one position, catchers want to do it. Hey, an extra day of rest for everybody, can rotate between first base, DH, and catcher. That's fine. T.T. Bowens, he's off to a great start. I could see him easily being in Norfolk by the time Creed moves up. So clears up a little bit of space, and Billy Cook as well. It is tough, but I think they'll be able to figure it out. Maybe you can play. Maybe Silas Ardwan at some point gets up to AAA Norfolk too. I feel like he's really developing nicely as well. Maverick Hanley, Silas Ardwan, Ardois. Tandem at catcher at AAA would be nice. Homegrown catching talent, defensive capabilities there.
Yeah, I was going to say Silas is going to be learning the streets of Norfolk here pretty soon. By the time Creed is ready to come up, I could see them moving Ardway up to AAA, and we'll see. I imagine David Benuelos is DFA'd a second time by the time this episode gets put out on the main feed. But I imagine he gets DFA'd Tuesday to Kerstad already. Well, I don't know. Kerstad's on the 40-man roster, so I don't know if he has to be. He doesn't have to be DFA'd, right? Either way, I imagine he gets DFA'd again at some point. We'll see if he clears waivers a second time, but I don't know how long he's for the organization. Michael Perez then probably steps into that taxi squad catcher role. And then you got, Maverick Hanley and Silas Ardway catching in AAA in 2 months. And then Creed comes up, and that's how you get your playing time.
I should say real quick, in fairness to Pavolony, he is actually off to a decent start to plate this year, even though his career numbers at the plate have not been very good. With that, I'm going to go over to Nick now, because Nick has 2 picks. And we've talked about 2 guys getting off to hot starts. So just to mix things up a little bit, going to have Nick start out with the guy who's on his list who's off to a cold start?
It's Matt Horvath. Not good start to the year. Started out 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts on opening night. Not great. He did hit a double on night 2 and then singled on night 3 and then did not have another hit over his next 5 games. The average was down to a very not nice 069 going into, was that Thursday's game? I'm looking at his game log here and can't do math with dates and stuff. So, but the point is, over the last 3 games, he has 4 hits, 2 of them are doubles, 1 a home run, which went the opposite way, 5 RBIs, 3 walks, and just 1 strikeout. So he is 50 plate appearances into the season, and he's sporting a 20% walk rate with an 18% strikeout rate. I love those numbers. So even though he was off to the slow start, he wasn't pressing. He remained patient, kept walking, kept getting on base. I think watching him this weekend, I saw the Horvath that I came to love when I was watching him at UNC. He was a guy who went undrafted multiple times. He was a guy who I think scouts coming into this year's draft, I think scouts were very mixed on him. And it seemed like it was the hit tool. Like a lot of people had questions, was he going to be able to hit enough? Even when he had this little breakout his last year at UNC, the question was he going to be able to hit enough at the next level to take a flyer on him? But then there was even the article over at Baseball America this offseason about how Matt Horvath, I think it was titled something like Matt Horvath was the perfect draft pick for the Baltimore Orioles. He fits perfectly into this system. And he had quotes in there about how his adjustment to the Orioles training programs, how much he loved it and how much it was helping him. And I think we're going to start to see those adjustments as the year plays out. So I don't think that 069 average that he was at a couple days ago, the low OPS, the low WRC plus, I don't think that sticks with Horvath. I do think he ends up performing well. We see this all the time with guys. It's his first full year in the big leagues or in pro ball. He's at high A where a lot of these guys tend to struggle. He's made some adjustments. I think he's a project pick, especially with that swing. So he's learning to play with those adjustments. The speed, power, defense, they all play. He's played a lot of third base in Aberdeen and he's played it well. That's impressed me. I think the Orioles can improve that hit tool, and I think he skyrockets by the end of the year. And he is that Matt Horvath that so many people were hyping up this offseason, and I think we started feeling that love a lot as well, and hyping up Horvath as a guy who could really skyrocket up a top 30 list this year.
Yeah, I could not be less worried about Matt Horvath. If you put a gun to my head, that's a weird analogy. He's got 20% walk rate. He's only striking out 18% of the time. His BABIP is 167. That's unsustainably low. And still, his WRC plus is still 92, despite being only 620, batting 150. That just says it all. It's been 50 plate appearances. Talk to me in another 50 or so, and I think we'll be fine. It's all going to even out in the long run, and he'll be another guy that just based on this cold start alone, when he gets promoted inevitably to Bowie, midway through the year, it'll be like, oh, really? Horvath promoted with these kind of numbers? And then boom, he goes off at Bowie, kind of like Kowser Norby did a couple of years ago. So yeah, I'm still a huge fan of Horvath. He is, spoiler alert for our next top 50 update. On my personal rankings, he has not taken a hit. But yeah, cold start, it happens.
Yeah, he won't be taking much of a hit on mine either. And there's, you both touched on it. There's always a player or two who gets off to a slower than expected start at Aberdeen. And then their numbers, a couple months into the season are kind of middling. Then they go to Bowie and they hit the cover off the ball. I could see Horvath being that guy this year. As Bob mentioned, he's having bad luck on balls put in play right now. He could afford to hit the ball on the ground a little bit less, but that's going to come with time. The weekend that he had in Hudson Valley, I think, is a good sign of a possible breakout here in the next couple of weeks. So, yeah, I'm not worried about him.
Well, let's go to a guy who maybe there's some concern. I don't think there is. Let's talk about Freddie Bencosme. I put his name on the rundown just because I don't remember if we talked about him or not last week or recently. Like, I don't know, the dailies, the Patreon shows, the main shows, it's all running together for me now at this point. But we also talked a lot about pitching last week. I wrote the article. It's up on our Substack now. Go check it out. 8 pitchers that are impressing me. So there's a lot of talk about pitchers. So I figured let's just hit hitting. And like we've been big fans of Ben Cosme since back in the day, the good old days, when he was posting the bunting hype videos on Instagram when he was in the DSL. The kid just drips confidence. Played in 2 games in the FCO, gets promoted to Delmarva, where he had a 138 WRC plus in Delmarva. The Orioles social media team really does push his content fairly hard. I think the organization clearly loves him. We've talked to people high up in this organization who I think their tone changes when they talk about Freddie in a positive way as well. He got to high last year. It wasn't great. 88 WRC plus, still no real home defensively. I was still had high hopes for Ben Cosme to break out of this funk in AA, but I did not imagine that we would see a Ben Cosme who 2.5 weeks through the year has a WRC plus of 185. He's hitting home runs at 100 plus miles per hour. He very rarely struck out already, and he's posting a career low 10% strikeout rate. I think he's arguably, you guys tell me if you agree or not, the most improved player defensively in this system right now. Because I hate it when people want to bring up talk about prospects who I know they haven't watched and talk about how many errors they've committed. I don't care about the error statistic. It is subjective. Even Bowie's home score isn't helping out Freddie with the error thing, because I can tell you at least 3. The other 3, I don't know. I have to go back and look. But I can tell you 3 of those 6 errors, he has been charged with 6 errors. 3 of those errors, he should not, those are not errors. Anthony Servideo had no business going after a ball, and he just ran into Ben Cosme. Like, stay over at third base. Either way, the error got charged to Bowie. There was a rocket that Ben Cosme just didn't get to, but got charged with the error. And there was another one where he took a bad hop on him. So I had 3 distinct plays that he was charged with an error and should not have been. I think he's the most improved defensive player in the system. He's fun. He's 21 years old at AA. Again, he's young at the level. That means a lot.
Superstar shortstop prospect. Orioles needed another one since they traded Joey Ortiz, and looks like they might have got one. Yeah, I agree defensively. Talked about it a lot last year, how much I thought he improved. He looks even better out there this year. Just super smooth. Just knows what he's doing, knows where to be. Yeah, he is super fun to watch on defense and just super fun to watch in general. Yeah, already didn't strike out barely at all. And like I said, strikeout rate stabilizes around 60 plate appearances. He's only 4 away, only striking out a little over 10% of the time. And I think on the Discord, they're starting to call him Bomb Cosme because he's already hit more home runs in 13 games than he did in 114 last year for Aberdeen. And he does look a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. If he's going to add power to his game, he's literally treating AA Bowie at 21 years old like he treated Low A Delmarva in 2022, just hitting the ball wherever he wants it. But with power sprinkled in, forget about it. He's hitting the ball in the air 10% more than he did last year. Ground ball rate is down 7.5%. So hitting the ball harder and in the air more with his hit tool, this is a guy who's going to be screaming for playing time, and he's perfect. Even with all the infield talent that the Orioles have at the major league level, he is the perfect guy that could be he can play shortstop, second base, third base. He could probably play center field, honestly, if you wanted to teach him that, just with his skill that he has, the way his defense is. I love the kid. Fregendary, so glad we got to talk to him on this podcast. I think he's going to break out in a big way this year.
He is off to such a good start. He's hitting the ball harder than he ever has. He hasn't lost. And what impresses me is he has not lost that plate approach. I think it was always sort of assumed that at some point you'd have to have a trade-off where he's going to need to hit for more power, and the walk numbers may go, the walk numbers might stay the same, but the strikeout rate is going to go way up. And that has not been the case so far. He's hitting really well. And to touch on the defense, I remember seeing him play shortstop in a playoff game at Aberdeen 2 years ago and coming away thinking it's not beyond repair, but it's not, the way he plays the position is not really smooth. And as he fills out, he might be better off at second and third. Night and day, he really does look a lot better this year. And maybe you're not seeing an everyday shortstop in Ben Cosme right now, but you're seeing someone who, at a bare minimum, can fill in an emergency. And maybe shortstop is part of what he can do when he gets to the major leagues, because I think he's already got the potential to be someone who rotates between second and third. And now you could add shortstop to that mix.
Yeah, I would trust him at shortstop more than Jordan Westberg right now. And that's not a shot at Jordan Westberg. I just, he's played shortstop most of his career till he got to the majors. I just think Freddie's got that kind of smoothness and upside there.
And with that, now we'll head to our final segment of the show where we shout out a player outside of the top 30 of our top 50 list for something they've done recently, whether it's been a good game, a good week, or maybe there's just something interesting in their stat line that we want to point out. And with that, I'm going to start with Nick, who has a very exciting young outfielder and a pitcher who we've been waiting for a breakout from for a while.
Yeah, my guys aren't outside of our top 50, but they're in the 40s. So I was going to cheat just because I wanted to make sure we touched on them here. Thomas Sosa is the outfielder. I think at one point, like a week ago, he was striking out like almost 60% of the time. I think he led all of minor league baseball in strikeout rate, but that is down. It is down.
More
I don't know
like
what
Jackson
it is.
Holiday Jr., not Ken Griffey Jr.
Yeah. It's down to like 40 something percent now, and after only like a couple of games. But he's now riding a 7-game on-base streak. He's got doubles in each of his last 5 games, and he posted 2 videos because we couldn't watch Delmarva last week because they were in Down East. But he posted 2 videos on Instagram. One was a 110 mile per hour double, and one was a 112 mile per hour double. He just turned 19 years old. He is walking at a 14% clip. 129 WRC plus. I do think he's incredibly raw, but he is starting to settle in a bit, I think, which is good to see, especially this Delmarva team where the pitching has just been phenomenal. But the batters left, they're settling in. Yeah, we'll say that. My pitcher is Carlos Tavera. His first outing of the year, he's in Bowie. First outing of the year, he recorded 1 out, gave up 3 runs, 5 hits, 1 walk, no strikeouts, had a wild pitch. His second outing, though, came last week. 4 innings, no hits, no runs, no walks, 7 strikeouts, no wild pitches, no hit batters. The emotion that he showed out there on the mound that was coming out of him throughout the outing and at the end of the outing, he's always been someone who showed emotion, but I just felt like this outing, it seemed like he was proving a point to a lot of people, like that my stuff plays and I'm still a pretty good pitcher. I've had a roller coaster relationship with him that's been well documented up to this point. I was pretty much out the door on him, and then he has this kind of outing. We know he can run up into the upper 90s. He's got this lethal changeup. Like, I don't know. Like, you guys tell me. Like, I equated my feelings towards Tavera like being at a toxic high school relationship on one of the dailies. Like, he just apologized to me, and now I'm falling in love again. This is like the 5th time in 2 years that I'm taking him back. So, like, from an outsider's point of view, do I stay in this relationship or do I go with Carlos Tavera? Because that outing he had this week for Bowie was one of the better ones I've seen in the entire system this year, to be honest.
It really was. And it was shocking for me because I've dropped him off my personal top 50. I'm not ready to put him right back on from this one outing. I'd like to see how he follows it up over the next few weeks, but definitely caught my attention when I was just about to put him in the ignore, just breeze right over when I look at the box scores category. Yeah, hats off to him for sure.
Yeah, he's still in my top 50, although he has dropped quite a bit over the last year or so. I really hope that outing is a sign of things to come, because when he's on, his stuff is as good as any pitcher in the minor leagues. But it just hasn't been on a lot really since the start of last year. So hopefully this is a sign of better things to come. Go over to Bob now, who has a hitter and I guess a pair of relievers he wants to acknowledge in tandem.
Yeah, I'll start with the hitter. Anytime there's someone doing anything positively with the bat in Delmarva, I feel like I got to shout him out. So Angel Tejada is my guy. Talked about him a little bit the past few weeks, or at least once in the past few weeks. Like Nick said, all these things we do kind of blend together a little bit. But 20 years old, just turned 20, end of January this year. Middle infielder. He played 85 games with Delmarva last year and held his own, 96 WRC plus. Off to a decent start again this year, batting 268 with a 660 OPS, 97 WRC plus. But notably, the walk rate is up from 5.5% to 6.8%, and the strikeout rate is cut in half from an already decent 22% to 11.4%. So just wanted to give him a shout out. He also has 9 stolen bases in 9 attempts. So showing off the speed. And yeah, happy to see someone perform well in Delmarva at the plate. And my pitchers, Felix Bautista has taught me that with minor league relievers, you just got to be patient. If someone is just struggling, but an organization, at least a smart one like the Orioles are now, sticks with them, keeps putting them out there, keeps giving them chance after chance, there's probably a really good reason for that. And Cade Stroud and Graham Fireved are that, in my eyes, potentially coming through this year as a breakthrough performer. Cade Stroud is a guy who, if you've been listening to this podcast a while, John Mioli shouted him out years ago, saying he's got elite stuff. We've seen the elite stuff, but no command whatsoever. I watched him walk the stadium at a spring training game last year. So far, he just walked the first batter in his last appearance. But so far in 6.2 innings for Double A Bowie, he has 8 strikeouts, only 1 walk, hasn't given up a run, only 3 hits allowed. Looks really good. If he's going to have this type of control, command, or even close to it, he's going to be in AAA soon, and he will be an option for the Major League bullpen at some point. And Graham Fireved, when he was drafted, I was excited because I'm like, oh, he's got an elite fastball, pure relief prospect. This could be fun. He can move fast. Well, he struggled quite a bit last year, or at least he was up and down, didn't really perform up to what I was expecting, at least. But so far in High A Aberdeen this year, 7 innings. He has a 0 ERA as well, 2 saves, only given up 1 hit. He has walked 5, but struck out 6. And it just seems like it's coming together a little bit more for him. Not saying that he's going to shoot up the organization this year, but I could see him ending the year in Bowie and setting himself up for a nice 2025.
Good choices there. I'll go with my guys. I'm going to start with the hitter, and it is the mainstay of this segment, TT Bowens. I think that Bowens has been here numerous times over the years, and for good reason. The guy hits everywhere he goes. He belted 2 home runs in Bowie series against Altoona last week and hit safely in 4 of the 5 games in which he appeared. Bowens, you might remember last year, lost a good portion of the season to injury and actually ended up only playing 47 games at Double-A. He had a stint after the season in the Arizona Fall League, which didn't go all that well, but he has shown no signs of anything from 2023 carrying over because he's off to a strong start at Bowie, hitting 318 right now in the 989 OPS, already has 3 homers in 12 games. So great start to the season for him. And then my pitcher is Edgar Portes. Portes is not in our top 50, but I suspect it's not going to be a whole lot longer before he is. And if you're a patron, you'll find out here in a couple weeks when we do our monthly update. He had an outing last week against Hudson Valley, 4 innings of relief, struck out 5 batters while walking 2 and giving up a run, which came on a solo home run. That was the only hit he allowed. And that continued what has been a strong start to the season for him. Through 11 innings, entirely of long relief work, he struck out 11 batters while walking 4, giving up just 2 earned runs on 6 hits. You could quibble a little bit with the walks, but remember how far Portes has come in his development and the fact that he is still only 21 years old. 2 years ago at Delmarva, he walked 37 batters in 57 innings. That number dropped last year, and then it continues to drop into the early stages of this season. Nick touched on Substack earlier this week. Go check out that article if you haven't seen it yet, because this guy has really good stuff. And I think now we're starting to see where the command in particular of his secondaries is improving. And he's, to me, becoming one of the more interesting young arms in this system.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Portes. He was in my personal top 50 going into the preseason. We'll see where he ends up in a couple weeks.
I mean, he spent the offseason, at least one session, I don't know how much, but homeboy trained with Pedro Martinez this offseason. So learning from a future Hall of Famer is not a bad way to spend your offseason.
That does it for this episode. We're going to be back later in the week to take listener questions in a mailbag, which will cover Major League and minor league topics. And don't forget, we have a live show coming up on May 11th at Checker Spot Brewing, located just not too far from Camden Yards. Checker Spot will be a great place for us to have this show. We've been there before. We're happy to be back. The show will begin at 2 p.m., just before the Orioles take on the Diamondbacks. So if you have tickets that day, come by, see us, then head over to the game. If you don't have tickets, come to the show and then hang out at Checker Spot afterwards. They will have the game on, and we'll have a little bit of a viewing party after our show. So looking forward to that. We will have more details on that between now and the 11th, including guests that we're going to have on, as well as anything else that we're planning for that episode. But we look forward to seeing you there. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on this episode, we take questions from our listeners about all things Orioles, including Major League and minor league topic. Most of our questions do come in through our Discord community, which anyone can join. There is a link to that in the show notes. But if you follow us on social media or you're a member of our Patreon community who's not in Discord, you can always feel free to reach out to us with a question, and we might take it on the air. I will start with this question from Billy. And before anybody answers and before anybody listens to this, we're not proposing the Orioles actually do this. It's just a fun little exercise. Start, bench, cut. Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Jackson Holliday. I'll start with Bob.
And I think he did preface this, like, who would you start if you had a dynasty team and you're picking who would you want to, headline your team along those lines? I'm starting Gunnar Henderson. I think he's an MVP as soon as this year, potentially. I would put money on him winning one before he turns 30, though. That is for sure. I will bench Adley just because even if he doesn't perform with the bat, that's just the guy I want in my clubhouse. And I'm sorry, I can't have someone that's striking out 50% of the time on my team. See ya, Jackson, you got to go. No, it's super tough question because all these guys, defense up the middle, qualities that you can't really find many places. And the Orioles have 3 plus many more in their organization. It's quite an awesome problem to have. But yeah, I think at this point, that's the only answer I can come up with.
Yeah, this one, it was fun to think about, but I had the same. Gunnar, I think he's a potential multi-time MVP, to be honest. I'm starting Gunnar, benching Adley, cut Holliday, and that has nothing to do with his start to his pro career up to this point. This will come out on the podcast feed like later in the week, so maybe he's already got 2 home runs by then. We'll see. But yeah, I just don't think that you can quantify Adley's true contribution to this team or any team he's on. So I would still want him on the team, even if it is just on the bench.
Yeah, make it unanimous. I'll go with the same order. Start Gunnar, bench Adley, cut Holliday, all for the reasons that Bob and Nick mentioned. And no, I'm not concerned. We talked about this earlier in the week. I'm not concerned about Holliday's slow start, but for the purpose of this exercise, I put the players in that order.
All right. So Billy's original question, how he originally worded the question. Let's do we won't do that one. Vivek, I think Bob was about to answer. Jump in there and answer. Vivek's question is, while time is being given to Jackson Holliday to adjust, when do you consider potentially making a switch if production doesn't turn around? Connor Norby, for example, at second base. Zach, what do you think about that one?
I think you give Holliday at least another 2 or 3 weeks, how things shake out, because remember, Adley Rutschman got off to a really slow start in his major league career. Gunnar Henderson got off to a bad start last year. And the lineup is making up for it in other areas. Now, if it gets to a point where the lineup needs a little bit of a jolt and Holiday is struggling, when it's 3 weeks from now, I think then you consider the change, and then Norby would be the logical option if you're looking strictly at who can play second base. I do wonder though if the left-handed hitting aspect of that is going to come into play. But at the same time, if Heston Kjerstad can stick around, then maybe you're not as concerned about having a left-handed hitter there, so you could go with Norby. So I think that if Holiday continues to struggle for the next few weeks, you have to consider that. But I feel like Holiday's gonna snap out of this before too long and render that moot.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, we talked about it a lot on the last episode. They're going to give him at least a month from the time they brought him up to see progress made. It's like you said with Gunnar, it was about 4-5 weeks before he started to adjust and really make his rookie of the year campaign get started. So plenty of time still. I think as people were complaining about Austin Hayes recently, on the Baltimore Sports and Life message board. I'll shout them out, our old home. Someone was just bringing up slumps that Austin Hayes have had in the past, even when he's had good seasons. And I think there's been plenty of 1-for-30s and that type of thing in there. So still plenty of time to have a really good season. I think they'll give him plenty of time. And yeah, maybe if it doesn't happen, and we talked about before, you give him a reset, you bring up guys like Mayo and Norby to give them a shot in the meantime. But not worried. Eojmata. Oh, sorry, Nick.
No, go ahead to the next one.
All right, next question. I'm finally pronouncing it right. Eojmata says, when does the FCL and DSL begin play, and when do you expect rosters to be made available for them, and who are we excited to watch play down there, Nick?
Well, who am I excited to watch? I jotted 2 names down, one at each level, which FCL is going to start May 24th. It ends July 25th. So probably not going to see the draft prospects get to the FCL this year. DSL, I don't think there's an exact date yet, but that'll be like first week of June, probably. Luis Almeida is the easy answer, I think, for the FCL, and that's a good answer. All the injuries he had last year and surgery that finally ended his year, it'd be nice to see him have a hot start in the FCL. I'm gonna go with Edwin Amparo because I think he broke something last year. I don't know what, but it was a significant injury, if I remember correctly. He's a 19-year-old switch hitting shortstop with real power potential. And I know it was written at the time when he signed that the Orioles liked his hit tool from both sides of the plate. He got a $650,000 signing bonus, so clearly a well sought after player. I'm excited to see what he can do healthy this year. And in the DSL, it's Yamon Brown. This guy, switch hitting shortstop. I love signing day and scouring the internet and social media for clips and information to share. And when I shared a Brown video, I will say that a former pro player slid into the DMs and said that swing is going to be dangerous. Obviously, he's a 16, 17-year-old kid, so well, got some time to go there, but I love watching this kid. He posts a ton of videos on Instagram. If you want to see any, I would look this kid up, give him a follow. A pitcher, I will throw another name out there as well. A pitcher, Yaki Mondesir. The Orioles said he's up to 94 when he signed. I've seen a few ticks higher in some other places, but I don't know if I fully trust the sources. But still, this is a flamethrower, and I just hope he has control because the Orioles have found a number of these 17-year-old kids who can throw at like 98 miles an hour, but none of them have been able to throw strikes to save their life. So hopefully Mondesir is a little bit different, and he can throw some strikes this year in the DSL.
For me at the FCL, and I think Almeida is a good answer, and definitely a guy I want to keep my eye on. But at the FCL, I'm really interested to see what Joshua Lorenzo does. It feels like of the lower level prospects, this might be the guy that we've underrated to this point just because we don't have eyes on him. Yeah, you can look at the stat line last year and feel like that there's some things in there that aren't great. Batting average, OPS weren't eye popping, but at the same time, you dig a little bit deeper, you realize this guy has tremendous amount of power. and he's only 6. He just turned 17 last August, so he's going to play all of this season in the FCL as a 17-year-old. And I could see him being one of those players who is a real outlier there in the sense that he's hitting for real power, because I never look for home runs and frankly don't dig too deep into extra base hits at the short season levels. I just expect the power to come along later. But Lorenzo could kind of be the guy where the home run power is there from the start. And then in the DSL, I'm really curious to see what Steven Martinez does in his first full season. This feels like a prototypical Orioles prospect in the sense that he's athletic, has a tremendous amount of raw power. There's some questions about how the hit tool is going to play, but I think that that's going to develop. And then while this is going to be really hard for us to quantify, the defense sounds great. Given what we've read about his speed and his arm strength, it seems like he could stick in center field. And it's a risk to say that with a player who's as young as Martinez is, but I'm very, very curious to see what he does.
Yeah, first of all, at first I was like confused when they moved the FCL and DSL up on the calendar, but I actually love it now. We're going to get to see in quotes, we're going to get to read box scores for these guys sooner, and their season ends. And if they are developed enough, if the organization is confident in them enough, and Delmarva needs someone, there you go. You can continue that season, and yeah, I think it's a really good idea. As for the FCL, I'm just gonna. There's the obvious names, and the names that you guys have said are fantastic. For me, Jordan Sanchez, the Cuban guy that the Orioles signed late, not this international signing period, but the one before. Just feel like haven't heard anything about him since he signed. Very curious to see how he does, and I could see him being a guy that does go to Delmarva after the FCL if he has success there. And Yerber Ruiz, an outfielder that I think is a little bit of a sleeper prospect, will be in the FCL. And really, there's a bunch of guys that I could really just dig into and get into the nitty gritty of the FCL and the DSL from last year. But for the DSL, I will say Emilio Sanchez, Steven Martinez, Yimon Noel, for sure. Keep an eye out on those guys. But Elvin Garcia, another guy I really like the upside for. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think Abraham Cohen, back to the FCL, is a guy that is underrated. Luis Guevara has a lot of upside. I think the Orioles are just going to do better and better when it comes to the international signings, and can't wait to see what happens.
Go now to this question from Matt. Who is Carolina League Pitcher of the Week? Trey Gibson. And why have I never heard of him? Let's start with Bob.
For that, we'll bring in Chris Respitar to give the answer. No, he was on him first in our Discord. If you're not signed up for the Discord, sign up in the general baseball talk. He was all over Trey Gibson before the season started. And I'm like, this is the undrafted free agent that the Orioles signed. Okay. It's an interesting take that he could be a top 30 prospect in this organization. And he got hit a little bit his first start or two, but you kind of saw the stuff, honestly, right away. And then his last time out, he had a fantastic outing, 5 innings, struck out 8 batters. I'm starting to buy the hype. And yeah, year the pitcher, you never die. It's just one Michael Forat. Just we talked about Delmarva's pitching staff as a whole. It's ridiculous. Yeah, Trey Gibson, add him to the list. There's about 50 pitchers that I feel like I'm psyched to see pitch on any given day in the Orioles organization.
Yeah. If only there was a podcast that went over the games from the previous day and like to talk about some guys in a little bit more detail sometimes. Trey Gibson mentioned there a couple times. Anyway, all love Trey Gibson, undrafted free agent out of Liberty. That Jerry Falwell, you over there. But he is a Newport News kid, so I got love for him. Fellow 757 kid. Did not pitch in 2023 at Liberty because I think he looked at a girl after 7 p.m. when he was walking around campus. So they suspended him for the year. Scam school. But here's what Joe Doyle wrote about. Pull it up. It's not loading. Here he goes. I'm just going to read straight from Joe Doyle's scouting report on him last year. So for anyone who hasn't heard of Trey Gibson, here's a little bit more detail. Prototype righty with a riding fastball and the ability to throw strikes. Been up to the mid 90s, sits in the lower 90s. Devastating breaking ball that he pounds the zone with early and late in counts. Hard, firm, sweeping break. Tunnels impressively off the fastball, plus breaking ball as he ages. There's also a changeup that has given lefty bats fits when it's on. He's already physically matured, so he likely won't add too much velo, but he operates with now stuff, projects as a back-end rotation starter profile, missed the entire 2023 season for unspecified reasons, specifically a suspension. He's no longer on the Liberty roster, so teams will have that on their radar. I imagine whatever the suspension was, whether it was looking at a girl or whatever it was probably the reason why he wasn't drafted. But Orioles picked him up, and I'm glad he's in the organization, to be honest. Sounds promising.
He looks really good right now. That first outing was rough, but the stuff has looked better, and the results have been a lot better in his next two outings. So Chris in our Discord channel might be onto something here.
Let's hope so. Alex has a question, wants to know, do the Orioles lead the AL in runs scored by the end of the year? And if not, which team does, Bob?
I'm going to have to say we do. Just because, look, Kjerstad's, Austin Hayes is hurt. What are we going to do? What are we going to do without Austin Hayes? Heston Kjerstad's going to come up and steal his spot, hopefully for the rest of the season. I think we're already fifth right now in the majors in runs scored, and I can only see it getting better as the year goes on, honestly, as Holiday clicks, as more guys come up, and some of the older I would say they're still solid players, but when our expectations are this high and we have so much talent in the minors, they get passed by. I think it's only going to continue to raise the ceiling of what the offense can do. So because I don't really know, I would say it's between the Braves, the Dodgers, and the Orioles by the end of the year.
Looking at the AL specifically, it's kind of interesting to me that Cleveland is 2 runs ahead of the Orioles right now. Cleveland has a good lineup, but I always kind of think of them as a team that when they're contending is really doing so on the strength of their pitching. Right now, they're hitting well. If I had to guess, though, I do think the Orioles lead the league in runs scored for the reasons that Bob mentioned, which are they're second right now in the league by a very narrow margin, just 2 runs, without some of the guys that are expected to be big contributors hitting the ball well. We haven't, we've talked about Jackson Holiday a lot, but Cedric Mullins just got going last week. We haven't seen the best of Anthony Santander yet. So there's a lot of players where I think that that's going to continue to raise the ceiling of what this team can do. If there's a threat, though, for outscoring the Orioles in the American League this year, it's Texas. Just because of the talent they have on that roster. I don't know if their pitching staff is going to hold up over the course of a full season, but they can hit. So keep an eye on the Rangers, but I do think the Orioles right now could lead the league in runs scored at the end of the year.
I'd probably have to agree just because I don't see Cleveland maintaining this kind of pace that they're scoring. Josh Naylor, I love that guy. He always plays so hard and gets hurt eventually, and that's a big chunk of their offense. If he goes down, I do think Texas is the biggest threat. I don't really know if Kansas City, I'm not familiar with their system. I don't know if they have like some young guys that could come up eventually. I don't know how big of a splashy move they want to make at the trade deadline. They're in fourth right now in the AL. I don't know if I see them as a threat. Boston is falling apart tremendously right now, injury-wise. New York is in 6 right now. They've got 100, so they're 23 back of the Orioles, and Aaron Judge can't hit to save his life. Gleyber Torres isn't playing well. As long as that team stays healthy and they start clicking, maybe they become a threat. I don't really see anybody else either. I don't like at all, pitching or hitting this year. Houston is falling apart. They're other than Jose Altuve, I don't know who's doing, and Kyle Tucker, I don't know who's doing anything with Houston. I'm a closet Tigers fan. I'm not gonna lie. I like this offense and the potential that they have, but I don't see any other threat. I think it's going to be Orioles at the top this year.
All right. Kenneth DiPietro would like to know, with Cade Povich and Chase McDermott, do you think they both make major league appearances this year? And if so, in what capacity? Like, do you see them debut as starters or fill a DL Hall type role later on the season? Albert Suarez is trying to keep them in the minors. Albert Suarez Hive rise up. He's dominating once again as we record this live. But what do you think, Nick?
McDermott is looking better and better these last two outings. That last outing, he had 7 strikeouts and 3 2/3, 19 whiffs, which was like 5 more than anyone else in AAA on Sunday. I think you keep stretching him out as a starter, but I could see him. I've said this before. I'm going to stick with it. I think you bring him up after the trade deadline in that time frame as a bullpen piece. Let him eat out of the bullpen. He can fill that DL Hall role that DL filled last year. Povich, I don't know about you guys. I don't see Povich working out of the bullpen. I think he's either in the rotation in the big leagues or in AAA's rotation. I don't see him. I feel like a lot of people instantly be like, oh, well, he's not working out as a starter, throw him in the bullpen. I think for a lot of guys that plays well. Chase McDermott can blow 97, 98 past you in the bullpen in a 1 inning stint with that curveball and his breaking stuff. Povich, I just don't know if his stuff is going to translate to a bullpen role, to be honest. So I could see Povich maybe coming up first and getting some starts, but McDermott settling in the bullpen. I forgot all about Albert Suarez, to be honest. It's good to see him pitching well. Burns, Grayson, obviously pitching well. That's 3. If Means comes back, well, another good. Line didn't look great, but he got up to 64, 65 pitches. That's good. Sounds like he's still feeling all right. That's tremendous. If he comes back, that's 4. Like, I'm not giving Means automatically a rotation spot when he comes back. I don't think he's looked good in these rehab starts. He's got to earn it. And Povich is a lefty. Povich throws harder. Povich has better stuff. Povich is pitching like one of the best pitchers in all of minor league baseball. I think if Povich keeps pitching like this, I'm giving him a shot before I put Means back in this rotation, to be honest.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Nick in that if one of them goes into the bullpen role, it's McDermott. I think that his stuff could play up in that short outing scenario. And, depending on how things go with Tyler Wells this year, we hope he bounces back from the elbow injury quickly and is able to make some starts. But if you get to the point like you did last year where you've got to transition him into a bullpen role, McDermott could also be right there with Wells filling a similar spot. Maybe you put Wells in higher leverage situations because he has the experience, but McDermott could be that guy who comes out of the bullpen, who gives you a couple of innings, or he could come in a tight spot later in the game and get you some big outs. Knowing how the Orioles handle things, they will not view that as a permanent move, and I would expect that if McDermott is in the bullpen in the major leagues to end 2024, he will go into spring training 2025 as a rotation candidate. But I could see him there, and then I agree with Nick, especially the more I watch Povich this year, seeing how refined he looks. That's a starter right there. That is a textbook starting pitcher, and it's just a matter now of can he sustain this for the next few months and then get that opportunity in the major leagues, because he would be the perfect guy to bring up down the stretch when you just decide, you know what, hopefully the Orioles could be in this spot. We know we're going to the playoffs. We want to give our starters a rest. We're going to skip someone's turn in the rotation, or they're only going to go out. And this could be where Povich comes out of the bullpen. The only scenario where I could see Povich coming out of the bullpen. We're going to have this starter only go 3 or 4 innings tonight. We'll bring in Povich behind him, give him a clean inning to work with, make it as close to a starter's routine as we can. But I think that right now you have to be preparing Povich to start this year and be penciled into the rotation next year with the way he's pitching.
Povich looks so damn good. And I completely agree with Nick that he's a starter all the way. Not to say that he couldn't succeed in a relief role, because if you got 5 or 6 pitches coming at you, I mean, that's a lot to deal with too, out of the bullpen. But yeah, he's got the starters repertoire. He's just whiffing people left and right. Leads all of AAA in whiffs, I want to say. I think we tweeted that out, or at least he's right up there. And honestly, if the Tyler Wells thing landed on a different day, I would not be surprised if Povich would have got that shot right away. He's ready now. If there's an injury, I think he's available, he'll be up, and he looks like he could be the guy that the Orioles traded for. Keep doubting the trades, but Elias, he knows what he's doing. He went after Povich, saw what the upside he had, and he's finally showing it off now in AAA. And McDermott, I agree. He had 19 whiffs in 4 innings, his last appearance, and just stupid stuff, but still walking a ton of batters. So yeah, I think it doesn't hurt to start him off in a relief role this year, like DL Hall last year. And then you can, go into spring training, he can compete, and maybe he's a guy that you make that decision when the time comes, a la Tyler Wells, DL Hall, the last couple of years. But yeah, I completely agree with you guys.
We'll wrap up here with this question from Eliza, a host of the Warehouse podcast. And this is an interesting one. Which player not in AAA and not named Samuel Basallo is your best bet to make the majors with the Orioles in the future? He adds here that Enrique Bradfield Jr. is a little bit of a cop-out. So I guess Eliza pulling Enrique Bradfield Jr. off the table for us. We've got to pick someone else, and I'll let Nick be the first to do that.
I'm also assuming, because he only mentioned 2 hitters in the question, that we're talking hitters and not pitchers, because I could go easy route and pick like a Bowie reliever, but I'm going to stick with hitter. And I'm going catcher. I know Adley's there. I know Basallo is him, but I'm going Silas Ardway. I think he gets no love. He was a 4th-round draft pick, lauded as the top defensive catcher in his draft class. Major League bloodline as well. We talk about how important that is. His dad played for the Orioles for a brief time, but his dad was an Oriole at one point. He's in AA now. He's throwing out guys left and right from behind the plate. He took a pitch at the nose, came back later in the week and roped a 104-mile-per-hour single in his first at bat. Like, the dude is tough back there. He's hitting well in Bowie. He walks a lot. I think if he keeps hitting as the year goes on, I think he's in the majors at some point next year, to be honest. Or at least he's definitely a guy who he's hanging around AAA, and when they need that catcher, he's the guy.
It's a good choice. It's hard to go wrong. For me, it's a guy we talked about in our last episode. It's Judd Fabian, just because, similar to Enrique Bradfield, he could not hit a lick, and his defense and his speed and his just power, if you need someone to run into one, we've talked about in the past, like, that's a major league 4th or 5th outfielder already right there. And it seems like he's making strides in cutting down the swing and miss, or at least cutting down the strikeouts. So if that's the case, even better. He could be the starting center fielder after Cedric Mullins. If you got an outfield of Cowser, Fabian, Kerstad / Beavers, I mean, that's not too shabby either. So Fabian's my guy. I really like the way he's trending right now.
I'll stick with Bowie. I'm going to take Frederick Bencosme. Right now, what Bencosme is doing is he's hitting for power. He's getting better at shortstop. We talked about this a lot on our last episode, but to me, he's starting to answer the 2 big questions that I think have surrounded him to this point, which is, is he going to have any value defensively? The answer is yes, because he's going to be able to play 3 infield positions. Even if shortstop is not always where you want him to be, he will be able to fill in there. And he's going to have a good plate approach. He's going to hit for contact. And we're not looking at anything close to Gunnar Henderson power. We're probably not even looking at Jackson Holiday power for Bencosme. But is a 15 to 20 home run season in his prime, especially as a left-handed hitter at Camden Yards, out of the question? Absolutely not. And for an infielder that's going to move around to a few different positions and draw walks and never strike out, That's a good skill set to have.
Can't argue with that.
And with that, that does it for this week's mailbag. Thank you, as always, to our listeners for their thought-provoking questions. We will continue to do this throughout the season. We will be back at a special time next week. Bob and I will be back on next week. So look for more details on that between now and our next episode, which you can find on our multitude of social media channels, including Facebook, Threads, Instagram, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And don't forget about our Patreon community. And as a reminder, on May 11th, we will be hosting a live show at Checker Spot Brewing, located a short distance from Camden Yards. Checker Spot, it's the perfect place to come pregame and listen to us, especially if you have tickets to the Orioles and Diamondbacks matchup that afternoon. If you don't have tickets, come to the show and then stick around Checker Spot afterwards. They will have the game on. We'll have a little bit of a viewing party. It should all be a lot of fun. And we will have more details on an episode between now and the 11th, including guests, the format of the episode, and more. So you're not going to want to miss that. Please join us on May 11th. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.